Hey, this is Sharif. Before we start today's episode, I wanted to let you know that Kevin and I are doing our first live webinar. It'll be 45 minutes long on Friday, July 26th at noon Eastern Time. The topic for the webinar will be how to grow in confidence, but you can think of it like an interactive podcast episode. So throughout our discussion, you'll be able to ask questions on the topic at hand, how to grow in confidence, or on anything else that you have questions about related to optimal work. This is our first time doing an event like this, so we're super excited about it, and we really hope you can join us. You can sign up at optimalwork.com/events. Hey, this is Sharif here with another episode of the Optimal Work podcast, joined by Dr. Kevin Majers. Kevin, good to be back here with you during these summer months.
Hey, Sharif, great to be back.
Yeah, well, Kevin, sorry to pull you away from your summer break here. We had originally planned to be away all summer, but then some pressing events led us to come back and record another new episode.
That's right. I just finished all of my continuing medical education requirements, and so now for getting board recertified, I'm all set. That was my goal for July, and so I'm happy that I got that all done, just like right before we started this call.
That's great. So you're still a doctor, basically.
I still am.
That was hanging in the balance.
And I've done all the CME, and I've been learning a lot, so I actually enjoyed the process.
That's great. Well, the reason why I wanted to do this episode partly was to let more people know about the anxiety course that we just developed called Overcoming Anxiety, and launched it on OptimalWork.com. So it's there. So if you're a premium subscriber, you can see this, beautiful approach to anxiety, what it is, how it works, how to overcome it, as we say. But was there anything that you learned in your continuing medical education that would have shed light on the anxiety course?
That's a great question. Probably the biggest thing is the impact of diet on mental health and anxiety, and that has become much more mainstream in psychiatry. So they call it like psychonutrition or nutritional psychiatry. But there's this burgeoning field really that looks at what impact does diet make. We should probably need to do a podcast episode just on diet. So the evidence is actually much stronger than I thought it was. And it's pretty simple interventions that we could easily put on Optimal Work to teach people the things that have actually been proven to make substantial impacts, like greater effect sizes than antidepressants for psychiatric illnesses, just from adopting like a Mediterranean diet. So there's cool things I didn't know the evidence was so strong.
Interesting.
Yeah. I mean, I've been really careful about diet for many years, but I didn't realize, and I felt great, with a good healthy diet. But boy, I didn't realize that you can just take people who are depressed and then give them this diet, and there's a huge response rate. As one example.
Did you happen to read anything about artificial sweeteners? Because I cut sugar out a while ago, and then I wanted sweet stuff, so I was having stuff with like sucralose, which I guess just the body doesn't digest, and it doesn't taste as good as sugar. And then recently, I was just thinking, I don't think this is good. I'm not a scientist, so I don't know exactly why, but sugar is not great. But
I think sugar is relatively high in causing inflammation. And so undoubtedly, people who eat more sugar have more attention deficit and more mood problems. So, but the problem with the artificial sweeteners is not even necessarily the sweeteners themselves, but usually it's just a sign that you're having ultra-processed food. And it's better not to have any ultra-processed food. Having whole foods is much healthier. So something like 67% of young people, their diet consists of 67% of their total diet is ultra processed food, and it's over 50% of the total nutrients taken in of adults are ultra processed food. So that really is like a food crisis in a way. It's like people are just eating junk, and the more people can have, like the fruits and nuts and whole grains and and olive oil and all these great things that go into, like, for instance, the Mediterranean diet, boy, the impact, it can be substantial. I just don't think you can fool the body. So I think that if you give it artificial sweeteners, the body is going to react to it in many ways as if it's sugar. True, it's not actually sugar, but I don't know. I think that when it comes to what it does to your eating behaviors, that's what I would want to see. Like, I'm not sure it's actually better.
Right. Okay. Well, as I said, I cut the experiment, short. So we'll see what happens. I'll provide an update in a couple months.
Exactly. Keep us posted.
Anyway, sorry, we've digressed a little bit from the original topic of the anxiety course. So, well, Kevin, I maybe the first question that comes to mind is, we titled it "Overcoming Anxiety," and there was a little bit of a discussion around that. What's the proper attitude that one should have toward anxiety? We didn't want to, certainly don't want to call it coping with anxiety or something, or like getting rid of
that'd
anxiety.
be even worse. Yes.
But
I actually didn't like overcoming anxiety at the beginning.
Yeah.
But I agreed then with you eventually that calling it embracing anxiety just kind of sounded weird. So there's all these things that once you put it as the title, it just doesn't look as good. So what we're hoping is that as people do the course, they realize that eventually anxiety is not a bad thing at all. It's not even, if you're thinking of overcoming it, it's because you're still seeing it as bad. But in reality, it is something that isn't just neutral, it's actually good. So, and there's an unfolding change in a relationship toward anxiety where you start to become more and more accepting and then more welcoming. And so as you progress in learning how to deal with it. And that's the kind of the path I've seen so many of my patients go through. And now I feel like I've worked with thousands of people on these topics. So I feel like that's what I wanted to get across. So I don't mind meeting people where they're at. And so if it appeals to people where they're starting, which is that, oh yeah, this is something to be conquered, I'm going to have some, total victory over it. Okay, I'll accept that. It's okay for a starting point.
Yeah, but you drew the line at overcoming. We're not going past that. So what was your hope for what did you hope to accomplish, or what do you hope people who go through the course can achieve with the content that you've developed, with the ideas?
I wanted to share with people what I have learned in over 20 years of working with people on these topics. I feel like the fundamentals of the course, in fact, you could say that the course kind of follows my trajectory of how I first came to understand it, because I, right from the get-go in residency, got exposed to a kind of model of how the amygdala works. Not exactly as I portray it there. And so I kind of simplified it in different ways to the way it is now. And so that's how I started just presenting anxiety to people. And then gradually I learned how to make it more and more effective in shorter periods of time, in fewer sessions, so that ideally in one session, you could help people have a complete change in how they view anxiety. I'll often ask people the question when I start working with them, like, what would it be like if I had a magic wand and then all of this would just go away? And it still does happen. In fact, it was just a couple of days ago. I think it happened when I was talking to someone and I asked them that question. And by the end of the conversation, which was like 40 minutes later, they actually had experienced it. The entire issue that had been like consuming them suddenly seemed completely different. And they experienced this total flip in how they viewed it. So really it was, I didn't want to like drive the point home too much by saying, okay, no, was it the magic wand effective? But in fact, that does happen. It can see anxiety, when you are pushing against it and hating it, can feel like an immovable force. And it just gets bigger and bigger and bigger the more that you push against it. Or it's like a boogeyman that it's like you're running down a corridor and you can hear it getting closer and closer and it's scarier and scarier. But the moment you stop running and actually turn, it's actually not scary at all. It's something that is handled, that the resilience people feel when they're avoiding anxiety producing things is nothing compared to their actual resilience when they're facing up to them. Just because a person has been avoiding anxiety, now they feel like they have no resilience at all. They feel like they're just completely at the mercy because all they do is avoid. That predicts nothing about their actual ability to engage the challenges in their life. And once they start engaging them, it can be surprisingly easy for them to get traction. And then the entire problem has, in a sense, been solved. So at least I want everyone who does the anxiety course to go away never seeing their anxiety as a problem. It won't remove the actual challenges in their life, but it will allow those challenges to now bring out their best.
Before we continue, a brief message. If you're benefiting from these discussions, please take a moment to hit like and subscribe. Doing so helps us to reach more people. So you're not just learning, you're also helping others to discover a path of growth and flourishing. Thanks for your support. That's great. So Kevin, what's your broad vision for how, you might not like how I phrase this, but how anxiety gets treated in, I don't know, the US, in the world? So we've developed this awesome course, and I think it's going to help a lot of people to transform their approach to anxiety and to start harnessing it for growth. Do you want to write a book? Like, what's your vision for the future and how we, get this message out to more people and are helping a lot more people with anxiety?
Yeah, I think, I began with first in my own practice, seeing that this is how you get people as efficiently as possible, through the problem. And then I began teaching it to residents and seeing that the psychiatry residents that I was training, they would have the same results with the people that they were working with. And then you and I started the podcast and Optimal Work, and we get to see, we had all this ample experience, even just with the masterclass, where people who just by doing our original masterclass, we had a number of people whose panic disorder went completely away just from doing the masterclass. And I don't even know if we talk about panic there. I don't think we do. And so it's just one of these things where people, just their changing view of adrenaline and how to utilize it was making a huge impact. So I would hope that this anxiety course would open up that to many more people. Because I think the people who will take the masterclass in Optimal Work, which I still feels like one of the best things we've ever done, it's kind of a rare group of people who are going to see the need for a masterclass so they can work at their best. But the people who could potentially benefit from a course on anxiety, that is gigantic. It's like half of the American population. And then the other half lives with that other half. And so basically everyone in America, I think could be benefiting from this overcoming anxiety course. And I try to build it up as just the way I do with patients. So it's basically if I had, a few hours with you in my practice, I would walk you through these concepts in this order, bit by bit. And that's what we basically turned into this anxiety course. So I think it is a deep dive. But it's still, in some ways, it's every one of the lessons, we could go much deeper in that very same vein. And I hope that eventually we can be developing this so that we'll be able to show people what is the research for every one of these. Because when people see how, what the research foundations are of this, I think it's only going to make it more and more powerful. So I have high hopes that we'll keep helping people, help thousands, help millions of people to overcome anxiety, and then to actually be on the path of optimal work. Because in the end, what people will see is the profound impact of every tool that we do in optimal work. Because it's no secret, optimal work came out of my experience helping people embrace challenges and helping people to be able to thrive on challenge, which I learned in helping people with anxiety.
Yeah. So my next question actually is very closely related to one thing you just said about how, 50% of people have anxiety and the other 50%, are live with those people or are friends with them or whatever it is. Obviously it's very important that people are helping one another to engage challenges and are encouraging each other to engage challenges. I think that's a normal part of, being coworkers or being friends with someone or, being a parent or a sibling. But I think people might have a hesitancy towards helping someone with, deal with anxiety. If you hear, oh, this person has anxiety, you might think, okay, I can't really help there. That person, they need to go see a therapist or a psychiatrist or something. Um, but I think in some ways this course is, as you kind of just alluded to, is going to help people help others or those close to them who do, have anxiety or have these avoidance behaviors. So I'm wondering what your ideas for someone who's maybe taking the course because they know someone with anxiety. How would you envision, someone helping their friend, say, or a coworker with anxiety after having taken this course?
Yeah, that's a great question. We just are going to need more actual experience to see how are people using it and how are they sharing it with others. Because with the original masterclass, that's how we learned. And we learned so much that people, for instance, they had a company and they wanted now everyone in their company to do the masterclass. So I think we learned how to reach key people, that were able to influence others, and then they could encourage the masterclass. I think with the anxiety class, I don't want to turn everyone into therapists. So, and I don't think it's anyone's job to be the therapist for their friends and family. But if there are helpful resources, now the Overcoming Anxiety class itself could be a helpful resource. One of our podcast episodes on anxiety. So on YouTube, there are playlists and there's an anxiety playlist. So I think that could also be a way of getting people a chance to hear about some of these ideas. And then as we have more materials for we need to have shareable materials for every lesson so that in fact it's easy for people to then share things with others. So quick takeaways or links to public access studies or things like that. Because I think that the ordinary way that people are going to help others is by sharing good content with them. So I think we need to make more shareable content to allow for that. I don't know. How does that sound?
Yeah, I guess I was also thinking, I think it's common that when you interact with someone who's like stressed or anxious or burnt out or something like that, I think the natural tendency is you want to reduce the challenges for them or help them kind of avoid or commiserate or something. So, but I think one of the lessons here is that, of people, the importance of leaning into challenges, but then giving them strategies to make that easier and more effective of actually leaning into the challenge. So I think, one thing is just to be helpful in encouraging others to lean into the challenge and giving them the support and encouragement they need rather than kind of encouraging them to evade.
Yeah, and this kind of reminds me of there is a change in sensibilities that occurred in the U.S. on helping people around you who have depression. Because back in the 80s and maybe even the 90s, a common thing was encouraging your depressed family member to rest and take it easy. And the idea was just you catch up on your sleep. You probably need to spend more time sleeping. And so you would see people then in clinical practice who, at the encouragement of their family, all of their responsibilities were taken away. All of their work was essentially taken away. And they were encouraged to spend the whole day sleeping. Well, if anything is going to make you depressed, it's those things.
Yeah.
And so now we know that in fact, for most people, if they're depressed, they should be reducing sleep time, not less than 7 hours, but they shouldn't be sleeping more than 9 hours. That leads, in fact, to worse depression. So you had these well-meaning. It was just in the air back then that this is how you have to be really, I guess they wanted to be compassionate for people with depression, but really they were being accommodating to the urge that you find in depressed people, which is to withdraw from everything that gives energy. Now, they don't see it as that, but that's in fact what's happening. They withdraw from everything that could give life. So depression in that sense is very anti-life force. So anxiety is similar to that. And the problem that you can see in people who have anxiety is that their family members are very over-accommodating. So they're too solicitous for it. So it would be I remember once having a patient who was afraid of catching cancer from touching the walls in his house, them touching because someone with the type of cancer had sat on a piece of furniture that was carried through the house at one point, and he was afraid that the cancer got on the walls. And so he couldn't go through doorways without his wife watching him to make sure he didn't accidentally touch a doorway. So whenever he wanted to leave, go in between rooms in the house, she had to watch him. Now, I don't doubt she was so committed to her husband. She was so loving, and they were a wonderful couple. And he made a complete recovery, and it did involve him touching walls eventually. But she, this example of like a family member who, with the best of intentions, was over accommodating, and she had just said, "There's no way I'm watching you go through a door." He would have adjusted and gotten over it. Now, I'm not saying that we need tough love for people with anxiety. I'm just saying we have to be careful about accommodating them if it goes against our judgment about what does this person really need. So maybe that's one thing is I hope that this anxiety course will reaffirm common sense for people. Yes, we should be compassionate with how much people suffer, but we should also understand the dynamics of how you train your amygdala. And then, in fact, we can help people celebrate when they have, in fact, gone out of their comfort zone and had a bit of safety learning. So if you celebrate that, people will do more of it. So I think that we have to learn to see, if once people understand how the amygdala works, how anxiety works, it'll be easier for them to celebrate the real gains and to not accommodate the bad habits as much. At least that would be a great start.
Yeah, that's great. So, well, Kevin, one of the questions actually that we got from someone going through the overcoming anxiety, we have little links in each description of each video.
Yeah.
So you can submit questions or feedback. One of the questions that we got is, I don't have it in front of me, but the gist of it is, how do I lean into the challenge, which is, an important part of, changing your approach to anxiety? How do I lean into the challenge when it comes about very suddenly, or like it's in the middle of a conversation? So I have to be alert to other factors. I can't just totally withdraw from the challenge to kind of focus myself internally and get myself mentally prepared. So how do I, mentally prepare when there's things going on?
Yeah, exactly. I remember this question, and it is specifically with social anxiety. So if I'm afraid of talking to others in a conversation, how do I, in the conversation, welcome my alarm sounding? Like when it's taking me away from the conversation, and now I'm going to be more awkward talking to others. But it's something to that effect.
Yeah, that's good. I mean, I'm supposed to be the one asking the question, but it's good that you actually knew what the question was.
Yeah, and just to let people know, we do actually read those questions.
Oh yeah.
So and we think about then how can we come up with the best answers to them. So I hope that people who do the anxiety masterclass will actually use that to ask questions. And at least we can't answer everyone, but we'll know. We can at least see if there's something common. We can come up with a common answer. So in this case, I would say that there's different ways of practicing overcoming social anxiety. And one is you just go into these social settings, and it's like come hell or high water. You just go in. It doesn't matter what happens. So that's called the bronze approach. But you just make yourself welcome. Do your best to not flee. As long as you don't flee, it may have felt awkward to you, but it's progress. And the next time won't be as hard. The next time won't be as hard. The next time won't be as hard. If you want to make it easier, you do the next level, which is as much as you can practice welcoming the sensations you get in that moment, you practice. You might need to do that at times like where it's not even being fully triggered, but you can just remember a time when it was triggered and remember what it felt like, and then practice attending to that. A few times of practice, just learning to tune into the signal, actually can make it so that when you're in a social setting, it takes 5 seconds to start welcoming it. So it doesn't actually take that much practice until you get really quick at doing it. But if you want, you can practice at your leisure just by remembering embarrassing times or times you felt awkward. Just remembering that can teach you how to locate the signal, how to feel it with the breath. But then you'll find when you're in the actual situation, it's really fast. It doesn't, but even better than that is learning to just make yourself aware of the adrenaline being on deck. The adrenaline is present. It's waiting. It's ready. Like the engine's starting to rev. Now I'm going to put it into drive. And I've had the most remarkable success helping people with social anxiety to learn how to be encouraging and interested and engaged with the people around them. And that is the stretch goal. And they've told me, as soon as I focus on being encouraging to the other person, it's like everything just changes. Now they're not distracted. So I don't think my image of success isn't people trying to talk to someone while being mindful of their chest. That might be an intermediate skill they learn to practice in just a few seconds with practice. But my real goal is they're using an ideal, particularly to be encouraging of the other. And they're trying to put themselves in the shoes of the others and finding a way to like cheer up the other person or to make them smile or to just be like a warm and pleasant kind of, to create this kind of tone around them of care and interest. And very often people with social anxiety are in fact really good at doing that. They're sensitive to people and they're sensitive to how people can be anxious and not show it. So they're really good at reading others very often. So they're actually well designed to be just showing this kind of, they flip it around and then just care about the other. And I've had people come back and say it changed everything. So in fact, in this case, aiming for gold is actually probably the easiest path. Aiming to use an ideal as a way of stretching yourself is actually maybe the fastest. Silver, like learning how to practice mindfulness of the alarm, it's a little bit more of tricky. It's like walking and juggling or something. It's like you're doing two things at once. And I can see that, that can be a little tricky to get the hang of. And just coming up with intense exposure exercises that produce shame or embarrassment, that's actually a very tough road. So in this case, with social anxiety, gold is the easiest, I think.
That's very interesting. Well, Kevin, I think that's all I got for you today. I mean, we have more questions, but we can cover them at another time.
Wonderful. After our, I guess you and I are also going to be having some break coming up in August, and so
that's right.
After that.
Yeah, awesome. Well, Kevin, thanks so much for taking the time answering these questions. It's great to have you back.
Thanks for the questions. Great to be back.
Thanks for tuning in to today's episode. If you enjoyed our conversation and you're looking for more in-depth guidance, check out OptimalWork.com, our unique platform that delivers content, tools, and exercises to help you thrive at work and beyond.